say a unit vector, this is what we call a unit vector. Just like this is what a whiteboard marker. You are able to identify this thing by its image, right? So the same way, if they ask you to find a unit vector, this is what you have to use. This is the image of what the unit vector. That is what 1 over what the distance or the absolute value of the resultant vector. And I was playing this in just a few minutes, and then multiply by what the resultant vector. So make sure that you watch the video to the end. So anytime they ask you to find a unit vector, this is one thing you have to, I guess you must pause the video and make sure that you are familiar with this guy, right? So this is the image of what the unit vector. Is that okay? Okay, now let's look at this question and see how to apply this definition or the image here to solve some of what the exams questions here. From the question, you are given 3 different guys. So what I mean by 3 different guys is that you have the F1 and then F2 as well as F3, right? And then they ask us to find the unit vector. Okay, now how do you know exactly what is the unit vector, or who do we call the unit vector? So as I say earlier on, this is exactly what we call what the unit vector. That is what 1 over the absolute value of what r multiplied by the absolute value of what the resultant vector, right? Multiplied by the resultant vector. So this is just a simple definition. So this is the image of what the unit vector here. Now what do you know? You have to make sure that these guys are available. So what is what the resultant vector, and then what is what the absolute value of what the resultant vector. So let's look at exactly how to find the resultant vector here, because you must know this guy as well as this guy to substitute in this definition. Is that okay? So this is the car that is leading us for the unit of house. So you must, the car involves just maybe let's say 2 passengers, because it's just a number on each one. So we need this guy as well as this guy, then we are free to go. Okay, now how do you find the resultant vector? So you are given these 3 guys. So when you say a resultant vector, it's just the summations of what the vectors being given to you, right? So maybe results of these 3 guys, or results of all the guys that have been given to you in the question. But in this case, you are given just 3 people, right? This guy as well as this guy. Look at how they look like. They work in pairs, right? So this is the first person, this is the second person. Is that okay? So this guy alone has what, maybe let's say a boy and a girl. So let's say a boy is the I, and then the girl is what is the J here, right? Okay, now the resultant vector is the summations of the 3 guys. So F1 plus F2 and then plus what F2. All that matters here is that you must know how to add them, right? A boy to a boy and a girl to a girl. So this is the first one, which is the F1, that is the 4i minus or negative 3j, and then plus what the second one F2, and then plus what the F3. So this is what we call the resultant vector. So the results of what the vectors that has been given to you. So how do you add them? So as I say earlier on, the boy to a boy, right? So this is one boy here, second boy, and then and the third boy here, right? So what I mean by the boy is that the eyes are what I'm calling what the boy. So the boys, we don't add this to this. It's okay. We add the I to I, and then the J to J, and so on and so forth. So here we are having 4. Here is also another 1 here, right? Plus or positive 1 here, and then plus what? Look at something negative 2. Is that okay? All the I. So that's why I got 4 plus 1 negative 2. Is that okay? So this guy will give me what 3i. Is that okay? So that should be 5 minus 2, right? So we are having what 3i here. And then what about the second one, the second part? So let's deal with what the ladies or the girls here. The first one we are having negative 3 here, and then plus 2j, right? So 2j, 2 here, and then plus positive 5. Is that okay? So negative 3 plus 2 plus 5 here. That should be what positive 4. So the resultant vector of what we have been given is what 3i plus what 4j. So this is what we call the resultant vector. Okay, now what do you know? Remember they say you should find the unit, right? The unit vector, and then we know the unit vector. So now that we find the resultant vector, you must know the magnitude. Remember that you see these guys in the definition. Is that okay? We have this guy in the definition. What it means is that it's the absolute value, right? So the name of that absolute value is just the length. We call it what the length. All that matters in the high school is that you must know exactly the meaning or the name behind the terms. Okay, so what is the absolute value? So when you say an absolute value of something, so this bar here means for absolute value, meaning the distance. Is that okay? You just have to use the distance formula, right? All that matters in the high school is that you should know the name and its image. So what I mean by the image is the formula, how it looks like. So when you say absolute value of something, we are having these two guys here, right? So you take a square root of whatever you are having. That is what the first person, which is 3 squared, right, plus what the second person, whatever is here, squared, or everything being what under the square root sign. Is that okay? So this is what we call what the absolute value. So maybe that it should be in the Pythagoras. So that's a squared plus of b squared is equal to what, c squared, right? So something of this. Don't worry about these things. All that matters here is that you must understand that this is what we call the distance formula, right? Anytime they say you should find the distance of something, you should take the square root of. We are taking the distance of r, right? So this is the r. R here is the resultant vector. So that is what we find here. We find here to be what 3i plus what 4j. So the distance of this guy, these two lines means what a distance or absolute. Okay, that is the square root of the first person plus the square root of the second person. So this one will give me what the square root of 25. That is equal to 5, right? So now we know the r as well as we know the absolute value of what r, right? So we know the r to be equal to 3i plus 4j, and then we know this one also to be equal to 5. Now we are free to go. We can easily find what our unit vector, because we just need these two guys to find what our unit vector is. So let's just plug them into the unit vector or put them in the unit vector car, and then we are free to go. Okay, now that we know that this is exactly what we call the unit vector, that is 1 over the absolute value of what r multiplied by what r. This r here is the resultant vector, and then the absolute value of the resultant vector. So we have this r to be what 5 here. So 1 is just a number. We are not doing anything to the 1. So here we are having 1 over 5, which is the absolute value of the resultant vector, and then multiply by what the resultant vector, right? The resultant here is 3i plus 4j. That is what we had after multiply. So if you want to expand this thing, you should get something like 3 over 5i plus 4 over 5j. Okay, so this is what we call the unit vector. This is how simple you solve this type of problem. Make sure that you watch the video to the end to tackle some more 3 questions under the unit vector. Look at this second question. From this question, you are given the f1 and the f2. So these are the two guys that you are given in the question. They want us to find the unit vector in the opposite direction. So from the first question, you may go back and go and check that. The first question says that they are moving the same direction. So what that means is that they are all going this way. So okay, the first person is going this way, and the unit vector is also going this way. But here, for imagination, understanding purpose, this guy, let's say you are moving this way, and maybe your friend is moving in the other direction, right? So you guys are not moving along the same road. Is that okay? Okay, so what it means in mathematics is that if it is someone is moving in the opposite direction, that we use this symbol to represent. That is the negative sign, right? We use the negative sign to represent that. This is a mathematical language just to tell you that one person is moving in the other direction. But remember, the question says that you should find what the unit vector, right? The unit vector doesn't change. It is only one card that leads us to the unit vector. So the first thing that you have to make sure that you are finding the resultant vector. So how do you get the resultant vector? Resultant vector is the f1 plus f2, and we know how to add that from the previous example. So here we are dealing with just 2 people here. So when you add perfectly, you should get something like 3i negative 4j. So this is what the resultant vector. Then we are left with one thing. That's the magnitude, right? The magnitude, which is the distance. So how do you get a distance? Okay, by the way, we know that this is what we call the unit for. I've already explained the absolute value here multiplied by what the resultant. So all that matters is that you must know this guy as well as this guy. Now that we know the resultant vector, let's look for the absolute value of the resultant vector. So that is the square root of 4. So this is what we have to be the resultant vector. That should be 3 negative 4, right? So how do you find the distance? That is the absolute value. So is the square root of. You just need to understand that this is what we call the distance. Is that okay? So 3 square plus negative. Remember that I've put this thing into a bracket to avoid any confusion over here. So 3 square plus negative 4, everything is square here. So that should arrive at 5, right? So that should give you 5 here. Okay, now we are free to go. Now that we find the resultant vector as well as the magnitude of the resultant vector, that is 1 over the magnitude of the resultant vector, that is 5, and then everything multiplied by the resultant vector, right? So this is what we call the unit vector. So this is exactly how the unit vector looks like. Okay, but remember the question says that they were moving in opposite direction, right? They were moving in the opposite direction. So as I explained earlier on, you are going this way and then your friend is moving in the other direction. So mathematically, this is what we use to represent that one of you is moving in the opposite direction, which is what the negative symbol. Is that okay? So in a vector, so when you say one vector is moving in the negative direction, you just have to negate or put a negative in front of one person that is moving in the opposite direction. So this is what we are having as the resultant vector. That is 3i negative 4j, right? So if it is moving in the negative or the opposite direction, here should be negative. Everything should be negative, right? So this negative here will affect everything. So this one will give you minus 3ij, and then here it tends to be a positive. That will be 4j. Is that okay? Meaning that this guy goes in the opposite direction. So the unit vector here will be 1 over 5, and then this guy will tends to be negative 3i plus 4j, because it is moving in the opposite direction. Is that okay? Unlike the first one that is moving in the same direction, the resultant vector doesn't change, right? Okay, perfectly. Now look at the last question here. So here from this question you are given two guys, right? You have the a here, and that is the I negative 2j, and then you have the b to be 2i negative 3 over 2j, right? And then they want us to find the unit vector along along 2b negative 3a, right? So this is what they want us to find the unit vector, right? This is what we are given to find the unit vector along this line. Is that okay? Now what do we know? We know that this is what we call the unit vector by image. Anytime you see this guy by the way or on the roadside, you must call it the unit vector. Is that okay? That is 1 over the absolute value of r multiplied by the r, whereby the r is the resultant vector. So how do you get the resultant vector here? So we know that we are giving this guy. So first of all, you must know this guy first, right? That's the 2b, 2 multiplied by b, and then you are giving the b to be 2i negative 3 over 2j. Is that okay? So just use 2 to multiply that, and then minus 3a here. So let's look at how to calculate that. So over here you are having 2b minus 3a, so meaning that 2 multiplied by b, so b is 2i negative 3 over 2j. Is that okay? So minus minus 3a, so 3 here, and then b multiplied by the a is I negative 2j. Is that okay? So just multiply. So this guy will multiply the number, that gives me 4i here, and then 2 multiplied by whatever is here, that should be 3j, right? Okay, if you enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content like this. Okay, now the second part is 3 multiplied by a, right? So negative 3 multiplied by a, that should be negative 3i, and then here should be positive 6. Remember that here is negative, here also be a negative, right? So that tends to be a positive 6i. Now that we are having these two guys, so I to I, so a boy to a boy, right? With the red pen here, you can see that this is the 4i here. We are having minus 3i here, so that should be 4 minus 3. That gives me 1i, right? So just I here. Okay, and then negative 3j here, and then positive 6. That should give me 3j. Is that okay? So we are having these two guys to be the resultant vector. Remember that we need the resultant vector as well as the magnitude of the resultant vector. So how do you get a magnitude? That is the absolute value of these two guys here, right? Okay, so square root of 1 squared here plus 3 squared, that gives me root 10. So this is the absolute value of the resultant vector, and this is the resultant. Then we are free to go to find the unit vector. We just need these two guys here. So we need this area as well as the resultant vector of the r, right? So now that we find these two guys, we are free to go. Now we know that our unit vector will be 1 over the absolute value of the resultant vector, that is root 10, then multiply by I plus 3. So this is how simple you find some of the unit vector in your test, right? So thank you for watching this.